My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
It was the most intensive bombing campaign against Baghdad yet. From where I was standing on the balcony of the hotel where I'm staying, I could see building after building, one after another. I could see the bombs striking them, the missiles falling from the sky and reducing them to rubble. There were fires burning, the plumes of smoke rising hundreds of feet into the air.
Leave the area, you are subject to arrest. This has been determined to be an unlawful assembly. Anyone not leaving the area is subject to arrest.
By 2:30 that afternoon, 42 people remained sitting at the Crossroads. They were politely arrested, but the charges carried a possible 6-month jail term. Some pled no contest in exchange for community service or minimal jail time, but 17 pled not guilty and proceeded to trial. The prosecutor asserted that these defendants threatened society with anarchy if not found guilty. Although lightly sentenced, the Nevada City judges found all but one of the defendants guilty on a variety of charges. Some paid fines, while others chose jail. Many people from the community completely understood why these upstanding citizens sat down in the Crossroads. Some did not, and others were even angered.
Chicken shit!
This series focuses on the individual defense and aims to provide better understanding for this peaceful yet, to some, intolerable resistance.
Solemnly state that the evidence shown in this matter should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Mr. Blickenstaff, were you a member of the affinity group?
Yes.
Did you go to meetings?
I think most of them. I wasn't in the very earliest ones, but in all the latter ones.
Before the march, on March 20th, I mean, in other words, prior to that day of the march, did you make any decision as part of your participation in the affinity group as to whether you were going to sit down in the intersection at Broad Pine?
I hadn't made any firm conclusion. One of the principles that I operate on is I never make a decision until I have to. And so...
Should have been a lawyer. Or a judge.
So various surveys were taken, and I would indicate what I thought I might do, but I always reserved the right to change my mind at the last moment. So I made no real commitment as to exactly what I was going to do.
So on the day of the march, why did you sit down at the intersection?
There are a number of reasons. There's not just one reason. One, I felt it was time to make a real commitment to peace. That as background, I think is interesting. Now this may be narrative, but I was a school teacher and taught in the public schools for a number of years and taught U.S. history. Never once while teaching in the public schools did I tell that I had been a conscientious objector. And I felt it was time to come out of the closet, so to speak. That's one of the factors, but not all.
All right, well, let me direct your question this way. Understanding, of course, that your whole life experience affects why you would do something, But what were your goals that day in sitting down in the intersection?
Well, I had read the surveys of the public opinion that probably everybody here has, that 65% of the people in the United States would support the war only if they had United Nations approval. Now, I felt that one of the ways of evaluating the correctness of any action is to ask oneself, what would happen if everybody else did it? This is a very common criteria. And if every one of those 65% who felt that the war was unjust sat down in the street as I did, the war would have stopped. So it was the hope that by demonstrating my own conviction, other people would get courage to do likewise.
And what did you hope that that would lead to?
Well, that the bombing would stop, that there were many other alternatives to dealing with terrorism than the policy of the present administration in conducting the war on terrorism.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well,
Let me ask you this. What was your view regarding the cause and effect relationship between your actions that day and a possible change in policy?
Well, anybody who has studied American history would know that every war that the United States has engaged in, there have been people American citizens who have opposed it. And in the effect of the opposition on the part of American citizens to a war has varied. And probably the Vietnam War would be the one in which public opinion and public protest had the most significant effect on the conduct of the government. I think there is a good bit of evidence that social protest can be effective, and not just one person, but one person gets courage from somebody else.
So your idea is by expressing yourself, it will help to cause others to express themselves, and then that will lead to greater numbers of people, and it could, in that way, it would have an effect.
Yes.
What was your view about the war that day, March 20th?
Well, it's a tragedy. I think that there's a good bit of it. I mean, supposedly this was being done to bring more security to the United States. But I think anybody who listens to the news can see that instead of getting rid of terrorism, it has inspired more. I don't think that you can get rid of terrorism by becoming a terrorist yourself. And war by terrorism is defined as bombing in order to bring about political changes.
Your answer is drifting off here, so let's go ahead and have Kevin.
Regarding the legality or illegality of the war.
Asked and answered, Your Honor. We're going about the same issue by a back door.
Mr. Kaufman, please. I'm going to let him answer. We gave him this commitment as part of our ground rules. It's exactly the kind of thing I want to hear, and I made a commitment to hear.
What was your view just regarding illegality or legality of the war?
The United Nations did not sanction it, and the Congress did not support it, so that it was it's an illegal procedure.
Congress did not declare it, is that correct?
That's correct.
What was your intention when you sat down at the intersection regarding arrest?
I didn't know what would happen.
Did you have a goal, an ultimate goal to be arrested as the ultimate goal?
Not as an ultimate goal. My goal would be to be heard.
Okay. What was your intention regarding blocking traffic when you sat down in the intersection?
I don't think that, I don't recall any instances of the affinity group actually discussing the traffic problem. Maybe it did at some time or another, but that was not the objective.
Did you have any goal to paralyze the city?
No.
Have you taken other actions recently to affect the course of this particular war in Iraq?
Well, I've done most of the same things that the other people have done by going to the demonstrations in San Francisco, Sacramento, and all the various local demonstrations. I've participated in most of those.
How old are you?
79.
Where do you live?
On Willow Valley Road. I've lived in this community. I taught school in Downeyville 1952 to 54, so I've been in this area for over 50 years.
Okay, and you started in this area at the Downeyville School?
Yes.
What was your position there?
I taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grades.
Before I ask you any more about your occupations, what is your educational background?
I have a bachelor's degree from Manchester College in North Manchester, Indiana, with majors in social studies and education, minor in physical education. I have a master's degree in political science from UC Davis with emphasis on political parties and international relations.
Why did you specialize in those areas?
Well, I was particularly interested in political parties because of studying the influence of minor colleagues, all of political parties and political movements on the major trend. And I was interested primarily in international relations because of the interest in doing anything to make this world free from war, to stop war.
Now, what is your current occupation?
I am on the list as a substitute teacher and occasionally a substitute at Nevada Union High School. And I've been a licensed general contractor for 25 years because after going back to Davis and getting a master's degree in political science, I found it difficult to be getting a teaching position, and so I became a general contractor.
Okay, when you do teach now, what do you teach?
Well, you never know what you're going to get into when you're a substitute teaching.
Okay, and what kind, are you doing anything as a general contractor now?
I put my name on the list with Freed, which, and I frequently get called upon to build ramps for handicapped people and do minor jobs for widows who don't know how to repair their houses and stuff like that.
Very briefly, what is your attitude and philosophy toward war? Can you sum it up in one word?
It's, well, I believe violence is never the answer, that violence is not the way to solve problems. And I think that is well illustrated by a number of things in our movements in our society. Two in particular, being the labor movement and the civil rights movement. That I think the history of the labor movement in the United States found that
Objection now, Your Honor.
whenever it became violent,
Okay.
whenever it became violent,
Look
they
at
lost.
Stan. We're starting to get a feel here.
Okay.
Anything else?
What is your philosophy toward pacifism?
I am a pacifist.
Okay. Are you the first pacifist in your family?
No, I was raised in the Church of the Brethren, which is called Dunkards, which has had a position for 300 years of being opposed to war, and that my father was a conscientious objector in World War I and ended up, because there was no provision for conscientious objectors at that time, served 2 years in Leavenworth.
And the Church of the Brethren traces its history to what earlier religious group?
Well,
very briefly.
It's a part of the Anabaptist religious movement along with the Mennonites and the Amish.
From Germany?
Yes. And my ancestors came over around in the 1700s in order to escape German militarism.
And you attended school in Manchester, Indiana?
Manchester College, which is a college of the Church of the Brethren.
What did you do during the war? I'm talking about World War II.
Right,
you were a conscientious objector, is that right? And what did you do?
The Selective Service Act provided for doing alternative service, which is described as work of national importance under civilian direction. And I first worked in Virginia helping build the Blue Ridge Parkway. Then I worked for a year as an attendant in a mental hospital, in a Veterans Hospital in New Jersey. Then I was in human getting big in starvation experiment, and then worked in Florida building and installing sanitary privies.
What was the starvation experiment?
It was conducted by the Laboratory of Physiological Hygiene at the University of Minnesota, by the laboratory that incidentally also developed the K-rations, which was part of the World War II. And the starvation experiment was designed to find out, study what happens to people mentally, physically, psychologically, and then find the best way of rebuilding anyone who has starved. And it attempted, the experiment lasted a year, and is the only really scientific study that's ever been done on starvation.
Okay, Your Honor, I think that I should object. It is one off base.
Well, I think he's through with his answer. Do you have another question?
You are one of the people who worked starved, right? To
Yes.
see what the effects were.
Counsel, I'm going to propose under 352.
Okay, I'll go to the next subject. Now, are you aware of criticisms that are made toward pacifism as being an impractical and a dreamy-eyed idealism? But
I'm going
never
to object to that, Your Honor. We're not talking about philosophy of pacifism. We should not be. It's 352.
Can you very briefly describe, you had taught about being a teacher in the Downeyville School in '52. Can you just trace your employment history right after that briefly?
I don't object to that, Your Honor. His work history is also irrelevant under 352.
I think his work history with the schools and everything has affected his decisions.
Well, our decisions are affected by the totality of who we are.
I could ask for a brief summary on
Do that, and I'll allow that.
Could you just give a brief summary of the kind of work you've done since you were at Downeyville School up until the present? Again, not in detail, but just what have you been doing during those times?
Well, I taught, besides Downeyville, I taught in Oakdale for 2 years. I taught at El Dorado High School for 9 years. I was principal at John Woolman School, which is a Quaker boarding school, for 4 years. And then, one other thing that I did in the summer of 1959 was went to Poland and directed an international voluntary work camp sponsored by the British and the American Friends. The idea of work camps being to get young people of various countries together, living and working together, so that they would develop the kinds of understandings and friendships that would make war less likely.
And And did your sojourn there in Poland affect your views on war and what happens to countries in wars and things like that?
Objection, Your Honor, that's another 352. We're spinning off another.
It's a state.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Okay. Ms. Kaufman, do you have any questions of this witness?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Walker?
Thank you, no.
Mr. De La Fuente?
No, Your Honor.
Just one, Your Honor. Mr. Blickenstaff, you testified that during your entire tenure as a teacher that you felt constrained not to tell your students of your conscientious objector status. Can you share with the court why you felt so constrained?
Objection, Your Honor, that's 352.
Well, you can answer briefly.
All right. Partially because my father, who was a school teacher in Indiana, got fired from various jobs because his being a conscientious objector in World War I, and I was afraid that if I expressed my own background, I would be faced with unemployment. Now, I think today I regret that. I think that I should have been very hurt.
Anything else, Ms. Webb? Okay, Mr. Kwan.
Just a few. Mr. Blickenstaff, there's no question that you were there with the group sitting in the middle of the intersection. Is that correct?
Yes, I was there.
And you stayed there from the beginning all the way until you were taken in custody. Is that correct?
No, I had to go to the restroom.
Okay,
So I
except
did
for that.
It's kind of amusing, but when they said, did you leave the place? Yes, I did at one point, but I came back.
And it is your view that you wanted to express yourself and make a bigger statement by sitting in the middle of the intersection rather than just being lost in the crowd and not being heard. Is that correct?
I felt the situation demanded more.
Right. So sitting in the middle of the section fulfilled your commitment to your convictions. Is that what I'm hearing?
In part.
Okay.
Not
And you've lived in this. You lived in this community for some 30 years. Is that
50 years.
50? 50?
I lived in, depends on how wide you think this community is. I taught school in Downeyville 1952 to 54. I have two daughters that were born in Miners Hospital at that
All
time.
I'm asking is that you're familiar with the traffic pattern and Broad Street, Nevada City, and you're familiar with that.
Yeah,
And
it
you
wasn't
are-
as great 50 years ago.
And you are aware that at a normal day in the afternoon, that can be a busy intersection. Would you agree?
It often is.
Okay. And you also would agree that there are other ways of expressing yourself besides sitting there. Am I right?
There are many ways.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing more, Mr. Blickenstaff.
All right. Please step down. Step down, Mr. Blickenstaff. Thank you very much. So you wanted to wait for the bar. Ms. Webb, before we get started here, I want to go on the record. You're representing yourself in this matter, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you understand you have a right not to testify?
Yes.
You have a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination.
Yes.
You understand that by testifying, you're waiving and giving up your right against self-incrimination.
Yes.
Notwithstanding that, you wish to proceed, is that correct?
Yes.
Ms. Kaufman, I think, was going to help you with the presentation of your case.
There is a small part of the video that we saw yesterday, the police arrest video, that Ms. Webb would like the court to see again. And so I have brought in and marked as Defendant's Exhibit H my copy of the police video.
And I think there's a stipulation from Mr. Pond that this is
Yes,
a
Your
true
Honor.
and accurate copy of the video.
That's correct, Your Honor. We'll stipulate to that.
This is your portion of the case. Just go ahead and present it as you wish, Ms. Webb. Okay?
All right. Someone mentioned the other day that image of Woody Allen going back and forth and asking some questions. I don't really know how. Do I just start talking?
Well, in a case like this, it's okay to use a narrative. Okay.
Okay.
Do you want this first or at some other point?
I guess so. I kind of jotted down what I felt were the elements, and then the purpose, motivation, and the elements. Just let me speak to that real quickly. And I need my glasses. So. Some things I'd like the court to know about the elements of the charges. That the core group, as it's been referred to, were prepared for the day and the action in question, but we were, until that very day, hoping that we would not have to undertake that action. We referred to this action consistently as the if and when. If bombs began to fall, then this is an action that we would take. So it was very spontaneous and prepared for, but very spontaneous in the moment, right up until when the parade, as it were, was coming down Broad Street. We were questioning as to whether we wanted to do this. And we did so without an intention to be arrested. We did not think through to the end of the event. We did have some discussion in our meetings that we thought traffic and business in town would be impacted. We regretted that. We felt that since it was midweek and that the war will have been announced, we thought that people would naturally be in grief and at home. We didn't think there would be very much commerce to impede, and we did try to keep ourselves concise and around this box so as not to impede unnecessarily. I personally spoke in Pioneer Park at the beginning of the march as to the seriousness of our purpose. There were several hundred people at Pioneer Park. They were asked to keep silent, not to do the usual chanting and jubilation kind of, that we were going to very seriously keep the children of Iraq and the children of our young men and women who were being sent in harm's way in our hearts. That was the purpose with which we marched, in silence. The crowd grew as we proceeded, and people began talking toward the end of the march, but it was largely silent until that time. We believed that we could stop or curtail this action. Many of us had been involved with Vietnam and part of a larger process worldwide. I was in, I was at the National Monument when Richard Nixon was reputed to be watching a ball game during Vietnam, and we all felt that we weren't being heard. Years later, Daniel Ellsberg tells us that we were very much being heard, and we did help to curtail that war. We thought we could do the same here. We hoped to join with the millions of people around the world and stop this thing. And okay, the element, I was not sitting when the order to disperse came. I had made a plea to, or not a plea, I had extended an invitation to the core group that was sitting there to walk away, to not be arrested today, to join with me, to go to Sacramento the next day, where the Veterans of Peace were being arrested in protest to the war. I had moved away from the group, and I was trying to facilitate peacekeeping and keeping things quiet. And there were others. I know that Saul Rayo and Eleanor McDonald has testified that she was in the same area that I was occupying around the crosswalks. I had come into the crosswalk to talk with them. Deborah Cohen was also very much in that area and is evident in the videos. So I'm speaking to the ambiguity of the arrests, not at all to the fact that I felt that they were inappropriate or done in a way that was anything other than respectful and actually very kind. I was very proud of our local law enforcement, but the arrests were very highly ambiguous. In my case, in Deborah's and Saul's and Eleanor's, that I was arrested and they were not. And so here is where I would like to, if you would just look at the video, and you can see that I was not seen with the group for most of the time.
The place that this is cued to is right after Loraine Gage has made his announcement 3 times that if you remain in this place, you will be, if you remain sitting, you'll be arrested. It's an unlawful assembly. Troner then comes over and starts to explain to the group that's sitting that the arrest process, where I was had it cued. Can you reverse it real fast? It's really, I am sorry. I cued this last night and it should be there.
When you stay up all night, what happens?
Can you get to your email? If you can, you're further ahead than I am.
No, I can't. That's my problems.
I didn't see this particular tape until yesterday, Your Honor, and I had assumed that it was the tape that I have, which actually shows me giving the address. This is an address that Mikhail Graham took, apparently, and I had thought that this was in evidence, so I understand that it's too late to introduce my tape, but it is only, I just assumed.
It's a minor inconvenience.
And if we fast forward past the announcements,
Isn't he making the announcement?
he's making the announcement now. He's making the announcement. Now Troner comes up, okay. This person here, do you want to identify that person?
That's one.
Huh? That was Loraine Webb that you saw walking through the crosswalk back there at that time.
And there was considerable testimony yesterday that people did hear me ask them to leave and not be arrested, and I was surprised that the officers, I guess they were occupied elsewhere for most of the time. I was surprised that they didn't recall hearing me do that, but I did. There was testimony yesterday that supported that I was not sitting at that time. May I speak as to the reasoning, purpose, and motivation as to why I was there? And I listened to several people testify yesterday, Meg in particular, talking about how many of us had gone to San Francisco, Sacramento, and have been for at least a year, myself since the Vietnam era, been working very hard, but this last year particularly against this invasion of Iraq. We've done many things but felt it very important to speak locally because primarily for me, I'm very involved with local media. I feel that our local media is responsive, that we have, and our local court system is much more responsive than the system that's happening right now. But the local media has not gone the way of the corporate media. I happen to know that U.S. media is corporate owned, that NBC is owned by General Electric, which is the 3rd largest military contractor. That all of the major news outlets, including ABC, CBS, and CNN.
Objection, Your Honor. She's stating facts without foundation as to knowledge of that.
Without what?
Without foundation as to knowledge. He's correct. And of course, we all read the same types of publications, and we're all familiar with the ownership of the large media corporations.
This is a matter of record.
Well.
But it's not being, my point is, sir, that it's not being heard by the U.S., by the United States citizens.
Okay.
And
At that point, just move on from there. We can go from there, okay?
Well, something that's been motivating me and that I've been hearing corroborated at every publication rally is the criminality of this war.
She's just giving her state of mind here.
I would ask the court to limit her testimony rather than turning this into her personal dissemination of her views.
Well, I'm aware of what's relevant and what's not relevant. And, to the extent she wants to make a statement, let her make a statement as long as you can assure me it's not going to run on for a long time.
Well, you had said we may have 20 minutes, and I'll be far shorter than that.
If that's all. That's the only commitment I need.
Thank you, sir.
Go ahead.
The thing that's been motivating me most this last year is to try to educate, and I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I feel that the American people are, and my people locally are very willing and able and far too decent to comprehend the depth of the criminality of this so-called administration. And I feel that the reason they are unable to do that is largely because of the lockdown on the corporate media. They are not getting the information that in 1942, for example, the Bush family interests, four businesses in the Bush family were seized under the Trading with the Enemy Act for supporting, and I know it sounds outlandish, but people don't hear this. This is a matter of record.
I object on record, Your Honor.
I had to.
Let's let her just get through this, Mr. Farmer.
I'm
capable of determining what's relevant and what's not.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So go ahead.
I can give you a published article in the Union. The Union made me corroborate these facts before they published it. This is a matter of record that under the Trading with the Enemies Act, the Bush family, George Herbert Walker and Prescott Bush, grandfather and great-granddaddy of the family, were supportive of the Third Reich. They largely created the munitions through the Holland American Trading Corp, the Seamless Steel Equipment Corporation. Nazi interests were seized in the Silesian American Corporation and the Union Banking Corporation. It's a matter of public record. People don't hear this. People are ignoring the fact that this government has suppressed the Congressional Committee report on September 11th, which found that there was intelligence warning of the strikes that were ignored. There are correlations that are hard to believe, but the timeline is even right. The Twin Towers and the Reichstag fire. Shock and awe is blitzkrieg. It's a direct translation on many levels. The Patriot Act is analogous to the Enabling Act. The timeline is even the same. Civil rights were taken away in order to suppress dissent in Germany before the rise of the Third Reich. The fatherland and homeland security are analogous. And this is not insane. It took a long time for me to come to these realizations. The depth of the criminality of this administration is not being made brought to the attention of the American public. The rest of the world knows these things. And this is why we are being turned into the largest target on the block, where terrorism is on the increase. Clear Channel is seizing more media outlets than should be allowed, but Michael Powell, the son of Colin Powell, is chairman of the Federal Communications Committee and is further consolidating, is recommending more deregulation, which will further consolidate the corporate media. We will not be hearing about these things for much longer unless we do stand up, unless we do sit down. My very personal motivation for this war was that when the bombing of Afghanistan began, I began to lose my family again. It was Vietnam all over again, and it was a very deep personal grief to me. My family lives in Nevada, and when I told my brother that Iraq had been being bombed for then 11 years by the Allied forces, and that over a million children had died in Iraq as a result of the sanctions, he said to me, I don't believe that. I'm on the internet. Someone would have told me. He wasn't getting the information. My family we're now a family again because I got them the information. My father was a World War II veteran who served in Guam, a very decent human being, emotionally crippled. I have a published poem that talks about the fact that when my son had a colic and he was crying, we were thrown out into the dunes of Arizona because, as my mother told me years later, the reason I had not been allowed to cry as a child, and my son was not allowed to cry in his presence, was because of the acts that he witnessed on Guam, and crying children on Guam. So my motivation is not only that I care about the children of Iraq, and that ancient civilization. This is a 7,000-year-old civilization. The first libraries, the first, and until 12 years ago, health care and education for everyone. Indeed, no child was left behind. The boulevards of Baghdad were spacious and beautiful. And I do care about the people of Iraq. But I also care very deeply, and I know all these defendants do, about the young men and women who are going to come back from this so-called smart bomb conflict, who are going to be crippled. These repercussions, we have not healed from the Second World War, from the First World War. It does not work. This administration does not care about us. Veterans Administration is being slashed 30%. No, it's 30% of American veterans in the Gulf War are trying to get benefits that they're being denied. And this continues. I'm no apologist for Saddam Hussein. I think he's a bought and sold monster, bought and sold largely by our despot in this country, this man who was allowed to slide illegally into office. And I guess I have a question that since there was no connection between Iraq and Al-Qaeda, that since no weapons of mass destruction have been found, and probably because they haven't been planted yet, and when they are, will we ask why, if he had them, didn't he use them when his country was being invaded? And I know that I'm grandstanding, and I appreciate this court's leniency, and I guess I'll just have to say that I feel that this so-called war is criminal, unilateral, unsupportable, immoral, dangerous, and that this court, I think, has jurisdiction, I hope, to follow its conscience as to whether proof has been shown against these defendants that they intended unlawful purpose and that their actions were unreasonable in light of world events and their deeply held convictions. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Ms. Kaufman, did you want to ask her any questions?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Walker?
No, sir, thank you.
Mr. Birch?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. De La Fuente?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Just, you said that as you sat there at Pine and Broad, you were concise around the box. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, we had felt we didn't want to impede anyone's being able to access. We knew that there would be public parking that would still be accessed, that people still could walk into town as they generally do, but that the more concise, the smaller area in the center of the street that we could take up, the better. So we had a refrigerator box with flaps on it so that we could support it and touch one another, just have 14 of us, 12 to 14 of us in a circle around it. I did request the oncoming parade to continue to follow the bagpiper down to the park. We were very surprised, and I know that sounds disingenuous, but I swear to you, we were very surprised that people, everybody pretty much stayed. The bagpiper tried to lead them down several times, and they stayed, and we hadn't thought it through to that end. And it was also a surprise when we don't know where the information came from, that people, when they were told to disperse and to keep moving, had this brilliant idea from where I was sitting at the box to watch this parade of people just go around in the crosswalks. Was quite extraordinary. It was very moving. It was deeply moving, and I think people did get caught up in the moment. I know that I did, and still I knew that I wanted to be supportive and be arrested with the Veterans for Peace the next day, so I did move away from the group and chose not to be arrested that day. And was very graciously taken into custody. And my only point is that that was very ambiguous.
Thank you, Bree.
Mr. Bond.
Now, back on that March 20th, is it my understanding that you were there at that group in the middle from the first time they coalesced in the middle of the street? So you stayed there until we saw you walk off in the video, is that correct? Stayed with that group?
I stayed with that group until Mr. Travato's second order came, when he told us that if we did not disperse, we would be arrested.
Okay, now we saw you on tape. That was after Sergeant Gage's instructions and order to disperse. Are you saying that you had left earlier than that?
Yes, I left after Lou Travato's second order, I believe. It was, I believe so, yes.
But you came back. Did you come back to that location and then left that we saw you on tape?
I did not come back and sit down again. I came back to talk to people and bring people water and support and that kind of thing, as other people were doing.
Okay, so you were helping the people who were still in the middle.
Yes, sir.
Now, you said that you had testified earlier that you knew that there would be an inconvenience to the business and the traffic there. So is my understanding that you knew that's going to have some negative impact on traffic. Is that correct?
We felt that probably because of the timing of this war, that there would be minimal rerouting required. We didn't feel it would be an economic hardship to anyone.
Well, how long have you lived in Nevada City? Or how long have you lived in Nevada County?
25 years.
So you're familiar with Nevada City's traffic, right?
Yes.
So you're familiar with it can come and go, but there's still very good traffic through that intersection.
Right, I'm also familiar with the fact that several times a year that intersection is blocked off to no harm to.
Right, but you understand the difference between a planned event and a spontaneous interruption of traffic.
Yes,
You understand,
sure.
right?
Yes.
So that is not really a good analogy, is it?
Objection argumented.
It also assumes facts, not an evidence, Your Honor.
Overrule, can you answer the question for us?
So you would understand it would be, it's different than a planned event, than a spontaneous event.
Yes.
Right. Now, you said that you had asked people to follow the bagpiper to the park. Now, when did you do that?
Pretty much as soon as when the people began milling around, those of us who were in the center, those of us who were involved in this core group had decided that we wanted to make it very clear to people that that this was just something that we were doing and that they should continue. So pretty much as they began to mill, I made it very clear to people that they could follow the bagpiper back to the park.
But you stayed with that group, right?
Yes, I did. I invited others to continue on.
So my understanding is you directed people to go around, you go to the park, but you stayed with that group and stayed with them in the middle of the street. And of course, you understand and would agree that there are other ways of expressing your political views rather than saying right in the street.
Well, it's not argument. Can you answer the question?
Would you agree, Ms. Webb, that there are other ways of expressing yourself besides sitting in the middle of the street, such as going to the park with the other people?
I would agree there are always other ways to do everything.
Okay, so that was the affirmative in this question, is that correct?
Okay.
Nothing further, Ms. Webb.
Ms. Webb, the video, as I understand it, shows you in the crosswalk on Broad Street crossing Pine Street. That was you.
Yes.
At the time that Sergeant Gage, well, actually, Sergeant Gage had already made the announcement that it was an unlawful assembly. And you crossed right about the time under Sheriff Trauner was starting to tell everybody what to do. You then came back to the center of the street?
I actually came not all the way to the center, but to the periphery to talk with Nicole Golden and to try to tell her that anyone, to reaffirm that the last people who were there being arrested, that if they were arrested today, to let them know they would not be able to go the next day to Sacramento. In fact, at one point, it catches me saying Nicole's name very close up, and it reminded me of who I was talking to at the time when I saw the video yesterday. And that's what I had come to discuss with her.
Okay. So you heeded Chief Travolta's admonishment that you should disperse because there was an unlawful assembly or whatever other words he used. You left on his second admonishment. Is that correct? Is that what you told us?
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
So from that time to the time that Under Sheriff Trotter started making his announcement, you were not part of the center group in the street?
No.
Okay.
But I think the testimony, Your Honor, is that she was not part of the group, but she came back and forth to the group, bringing them water and encouragement. So
As
she was,
did a number of people.
Your Honor, respectfully, this is argument now. From
no, I think
the
I'm clarifying her
prosecutor.
testimony.
Is he clarifying
You can ask
her
some questions.
testimony?
You can ask some questions. I understand what she said.
Right.
Mr. Pong, it's my understanding of people's position in this case that when the unlawful assembly was declared, those people remaining there, not breaking up, you've charged them with that count.
That would be count 2, Your Honor.
That would be count 2.
Count 1 is still interfering with the traffic.
I'm capable of reading the English language, Mr. Pong. But you have not pursued anyone else who was in that group that you may have known about, or other officers may have known about, the group in the center of the street, who were not there when the unlawful assembly was announced. That's your theory of the case.
That's basically the officer's testimony. I can only produce what the officers testified to.
Okay, all right. Do you have any further questions of her?
Just one, Your Honor. Ms. Webb, when you decide to sit down in the middle of the street, your intent was to have a bigger impact and make a bigger statement than just following the crowd. Would you say so?
Yes.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Does anybody else want to ask her any questions? Okay. You can do what's called redirect. If you want to clarify anything that Mr. Pong has raised, for example, you can do so at this time.
I guess just to stipulate that whereas Mr. Pong feels like there was other recourse, that in that moment there absolutely felt like there was no other recourse.
All right. You may step